Hello and welcome to this series, which I'm calling Daring to Disrupt, where I interview people with unique life stories and careers that fall outside the norms of your typical boardroom leader. Throughout these talks, I want to shed light on those leaders who, firstly, I admire, and secondly, I believe deserve more praise in the business community for their noble missions and their unconventional path to success. I'm Patrick Da Battista, founder at Finance for You, and my own mission is to give everyone access to financial knowledge, whether you're young or old, rich or poor. And today, I'm joined by Dr. Roberta Lepre, founder at Weave Consulting, whose own mission is as noble as it is inspiring. But I'll let Roberta talk you through this. Roberta, welcome.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Thanks for having me. And thank you for the very flattering words as well.
It's an absolute pleasure, Roberta. So I wonder, tell us a bit about your story, who Roberta is, what does she do, and also your own interesting career shifts.
Sure. So I guess my career started over 20 years ago. I'm a lawyer by profession, so I graduated in 2003, which gives away my age, I guess. I had started practicing a little before that as well, a good 2 years before, actually. And I was working, as many other law students, in a law firm, doing typical legal work and thinking that my career would revolve around that. So I did some litigation, some corporate work, normal stuff that goes on in a law firm. I graduated, and soon after, I got pregnant with my first daughter. And that changed everything because, remember, this is over 20 years ago. And in the legal profession especially, it wasn't really a thing that you balance life and work. It's you're either all in or you're nothing kind of thing. So there wasn't really the space for a working mother. And obviously I had to rethink a little bit what I was doing and what I wanted to do going forward. And to be very honest with you, the only part-time legal jobs going around at the time were with public entities, authorities, or the government, so to speak. I landed my first gig with the Commission for Equality at the time. It was a new entity, Malta had just joined the EU, so everything was very new. We didn't really talk about discrimination and equality at the time. But that took me into a whole new direction that I hadn't really considered as a career path, So that shift happened really and truly, if I have to be honest, out of necessity, not out of choice. But I'm very grateful for that because it really opened my eyes to something that I wasn't looking at until then. And that's where it all started. So I started working in the public sector. At the time, I also started learning about EU programs and EU funds. So that's a skill that I learned, which went very well alongside my legal skills. And I started becoming interested in policy and getting involved in policy as well, besides the legal aspect. So it gave me the opportunity, to try different things and come up with something which was quite different at the time. I got very tired, bored really very quickly, not of the work, but of the working environment within a public sector entity, the bureaucracy. So it didn't last very long, but I'm very grateful for the time that I spent there.
Imagine. Well, Robert, I remember you from way back, probably over 20 years ago. And the first time I came across you was on national TV. And it was the first time I ever saw a lawyer, on national TV talking about what were most likely human rights issues.
Yeah.
And I always felt that you were, and probably still are, 5 years ahead of the curve. And to an extent, I can relate to that. So I wonder, what inspired your move to set up your, let's call it, boutique ESG consultancy, and why?
Well, it started off when I left my public sector job. As I said, it was because I got impatient sort of with the bureaucracy, and I moved on into the nonprofit sector. So I was given the opportunity to run a nonprofit organization, which was unknown at the time. And I thought that within a nonprofit, you'd be more independent, you have to be much more autonomous, and you can get more done, which is true to a certain extent. But I also wanted to carry on doing the work that I was doing. So I was doing it sort of as an aside, as a consultancy. So that's what I did over a number of years. I was primarily running the NGO, but doing some consultancy work sort of as a sideline on the side. Fast forward 9 years, I spent 9 years running that NGO, which I really loved. Again, it took me into a completely new direction. So there we were working with victims of crime, victims of domestic violence in particular, victims of sexual assault. So again, it took me into a different direction. But again, after a long time, I got impatient. I got very frustrated because I realized that change was happening very, very slowly, not at the pace that it should have been happening, and definitely not at the pace when compared to other areas where I was seeing there was a financial motive, So when there's a financial interest, a financial motive to things, progress was happening at a much faster rate. So I realized after too long, possibly, that if we wanted that speed of change within the society, we had to somehow engage the business community and work with the business community. And that was when I decided to turn my until then part-time consultancy into my full-time interest, so to speak. I had also spent some time sitting on a board called the Guardian for Future Generations, which sounds extremely bombastic and important. But in a nutshell, the idea is that our remit was to promote sustainable development at the national level, both within the public sector and the private sector. And I realized that there was a gap there. So once I was no longer on that board, and the timing was right, I said, this is an opportunity to go out there with the private sector in particular, educate them about sustainability, about how they can have a positive social impact and still be efficient and profitable, and then help them implement that new business mindset sort of thing. So that's how it happened.
Interesting. You mentioned this agility, this speed, and this motive, because I myself, I come from a very capitalist, very large institution, from an advisory background, and you literally have all the resources in the world. And okay, it's true when the tone at the top used to say, do things today, they'd get done. But very often it would be such a large organization that sometimes things would actually take longer than they should, than maybe they should, and which is one of the secondary reasons I actually went solo, because now, if I feel like posting a video about financial literacy, then I'll just do it and submit it. So in a way, being self-employed, being on your own, kind of gives you that freedom.
Yes, it makes you agile.
It does. It does. It's scary at first, but
Very.
you just release the parachute, you you get there at the end of the day. So I wonder how you found as Roberta as a person, right? How did you find the lifestyle adjustment from, a very corporate entity to public sector to now, being the founder of Weave on your own with a team now?
Yes. I mean, the first adjustment, I must say, didn't come easy. So going from a law firm where you're literally driven around, with a driver, and it's all very, uh, not glamorous per se, but let's say it looks glamorous,
Yeah.
to a public sector entity where you're asked to punch, this was a bit of a culture shock for me. And one of the reasons also why it didn't last very long.
I used to hate the name tags, the access card with the name tag. It's something that I just can't stomach. Why?
Yes, I mean, it's a completely different culture, completely different environment and mindset. So, but I do believe that it's really important to experience everything in life, because that makes you able to relate to everyone and everything. So it's good to experience the comfortable and the less comfortable, and the perhaps more resourceful and the less resourceful, because I think it really helps you to create that 360-degree view. But yes, it can take a while. Then moving on into self-employment, well, as I said, the transition wasn't completely, it wasn't a sharp transition in the sense that I had been self-employed part-time over the years. So it was a gradual transition for me. And also within the NGO, although I was employed, I was pretty much leading the organization. So in a sense, it gave me the chance to learn how to run an organization, or a small business, if you like, although an NGO is not a business, but you still have to make ends meet at the end of the day. You still have to generate resources. You still have to manage staff. You still have to service clients. You still have to file your paperwork. So it was, I think, a good way to prepare me to what I am doing now, and something that I would recommend others to look into. I think few people look at working in an NGO as a way to, let's say, develop their leadership skills.
It's true, actually. It's true. It's a cause that's more noble than your typical capitalist environment, and not a conventional choice at all.
No, not a conventional choice. And again, a tough one, because you need to have a certain level of resilience, in the sense that resources are scarce. You need to be quite creative in terms of how you're going to find the resources that you need to operate your organization. And so it's good training.
Yeah. You mentioned an important point, and this is a point that I speak about a lot to my followers, my clients, students as well, that okay, it's nice, it's may seem glamorous being your own boss, but taking the plunge, going in the deep end immediately might not be advisable. You mentioned phasing your current job in slowly. So that was, one can say, perhaps your side hustle for a number of years. So it's good to try and, explore phasing a job in slowly and gradually, rather than just, taking the plunge immediately.
Yes, and I find as well, we have this idea of founders being the younger people. We hear these stories of very successful, very young founders, which is fantastic. I don't want to undermine what they're doing in any way. But I think realistically, if you have a little bit of experience behind you, and I believe that there are studies that support this as well, you might stand a better chance of success. So we know that many startups fail in the first few years, 2 to 5 years,
Yeah.
but potentially those that are run by more mature people, more experienced people, I think they have a better chance of survival. So let's not underestimate the importance of building our skills within an employment setting, and then transitioning to self-employment, or to entrepreneurship.
Is there anything you wish you had known or done more of ahead of taking the leap?
I now know how important mindset is. So irrespective of how good you are at what you do, it's pretty much your mindset, your resilience, your approach that makes you or breaks you, I think, because we can agree there are many talented people, but it doesn't mean that they can all be good and successful entrepreneurs. So irrespective of how good you are or how talented you are, it's really important that you build that mindset. And maybe this is something that I learned through my own failures, in the sense that perhaps you set up, you expect to approach the first few potential clients and done, and it doesn't really happen like that. It takes a while until people know you, know what you're doing, you win their trust, and you need a very resilient mindset to last, because you get many no's aside from the yeses.
That's so true, right? You get, it's like you fail fast, you fail forward, you fail so many times. And then, at least in my experience so far in my young self-employed career, it's like there comes a tipping point when all of a sudden the floodgates open, and all of a sudden now the no's start becoming yeses. And that's another problem to have. It's a good problem, but it's also about then saying no to the previous no's, which are now yeses, right?
Or maybe saying yes, because I do believe that it's about timing. So earlier you mentioned that maybe I was a bit ahead of the, and with what I'm doing, at least, when I started doing it, it wasn't so popular, it wasn't so known as a term. So sustainability was really something, of the activists and of the NGOs, the activists we see on TV, and we couldn't really associate that to what happens in companies or to business. Whereas now we're seeing that the two are really aligned, and the two aspects need to be integrated properly, and that can have benefits both for wider society, but also for the business if it's done properly. So now we're acknowledging that. 5-6 years ago we weren't. So it's about timing. So yes, I've had some no's that came back.
Good. It's about timing and about time as well, right?
Ecco, that's it. I switched to more, please.
That's fine. That's fine. We're bilingual anyway. So I wonder, are there any big questions, concerns that people should think about or ask themselves before they consider a change in career?
I think people really need to ask themselves what makes them happy. I think we are perhaps given a kind of certain picture of success, through social media or through, our peers. And we think that perhaps to be happy or to feel that we are successful, we have to have a certain income, and we have to afford certain things, and we have to, progress in our careers in certain ways. But ultimately, success is what makes you happy. So before you make the change, either move sector, move role, or go from employment to self-employment, I really think one needs to look inside and try to determine what makes you happy, not what the world says that should make you happy. And then you move from there. And then another thing would be, where can you have an impact? Where can you add value, to the world? So it's all well and good that we provide a product or a service, but how are we adding value through the provision of that product or service? I think that's really key as well.
Nice. So I wonder, what is one bit of advice you would have given the Roberta that I watched on TV 10 or 20 years ago?
Well, definitely to be much more confident, much more confident. So I think, perhaps certain ideas that you would wish to implement, people will tell you that they don't work, or that you're being naive, or that you're too idealistic. And then fast forward a few years and it's all happening. So maybe you weren't naive, you were just seeing things that others couldn't see. So it's really important that one is confident in what they're doing. And I think girls especially need to work a lot on building that confidence, and being more assertive. Definitely that. In a humble way, though, in a very humble way. So, because I don't want to confuse assertiveness with arrogance. It's
That's right.
important to make that distinction.
There's confidence and there's cockiness, right? But quiet confidence is a balance. Yeah. Now, Robert, as you know, and probably everyone around us knows, I'm quite a big advocate of financial literacy in our society. And this falls firmly within the societal component of the ESG acronym, right? So I'm going to go straight to the point. Do you think our society lacks financial literacy?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And I don't say this sort of pointing fingers. I even just looking at myself and maybe other professionals like me who have learned certain things quite later on, in our years. So it's not just how much money you're earning, but how you are managing and investing that money. That's really, really important. It's not a conversation that we have. It's nearly taboo. It's like, rude if you talk about money to a certain extent. So definitely we lack that education. We need to educate our children, but also ourselves. So it starts from within the family, I believe, because it's easier again to throw it onto the schools and say the schools should be doing this and the schools should be doing that. And yes, maybe they should, but even us as parents, it's also our role to help our children learn how to deal with money and manage their money. I know of places of work, for instance, where certain people were earning a lot of money, but within a few months they end up with none because they have no idea on how to manage it. So it's really important.
That's true. Many celebrities, last week I was reading about American football players. Well, the football that's played with the hands, not go figure. So 75% of those football players actually declared bankruptcy
Mm.
after retiring. That's 3 and 4. So it's not about how much money you make. It's how you get to keep it, how well you get to keep it and manage it.
And how to make it work for you as well. I believe it's also a similar situation with people who win the lottery.
Yes, 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 because you
After
get
a couple of years, it's all gone, because if you're not used to having money and to managing money, then you just spend it.
exactly. So education, right?
Definitely.
And what can we do rather than or other than education to solve this quandary, this problem that's been afflicting us for decades because it's transgenerational, right? What more can we do besides education? I mean, there's compulsory education that, in my view, I think we should have a compulsory financial education, which doesn't exist. But is there anything that the private sector perhaps could step in and contribute further to what it's doing, or the public sector itself? Are there any initiatives that you think could supplement what's already happening?
Yes, well, we talk a lot about corporate social responsibility within my environment now, so it's pretty much about employers or business leaders taking responsibility for everyone who is impacted by what they are doing. And obviously, the primary stakeholder group of any business is their employees. So I think it could be interesting, for example, that perhaps this kind of education is integrated into any training programs within companies. We know that people are currently struggling, we have inflation, cost of food has gone up. So maybe companies might think of offering this kind of training to their employees to help them manage their money better. It doesn't mean that employers should pay low wages to justify, so it's not an action that should replace another. So I still believe we should be paying fair wages, fair. But yes, I mean, some help, some knowledge on how to help then the employees on how to manage that money and make it stretch further. That would be something interesting.
Yeah, and in this world of rapid employee turnover, what better investment to make in your staff's well-being than to help them manage their money better and
Yes,
create wealth?
that's it. That's it.
I agree. Things are moving slowly, but this hopefully we're going in that direction, more and more. Now,
yes, and there's also a lot of help. So in terms of training, sorry to jump in, but the cost doesn't have to be entirely borne by the employer. You know that there are funds that the employer can use to offer training to their employees. So it's a win-win, really.
You're right. Yeah, besides the incentives being offered, there's also part of the cost. I have had programs that I gave wherein the staff actively contributed themselves to
Oh, wow. Okay.
this, yeah, this
It's
initiative.
nice because it means that they see the value of it.
Exactly, of education, of financial education, which is fantastic. Yeah. So, okay, that's a small part of the societal component. I'm calling this for want of a better word. But do you believe, Roberta, having had your experience with, human rights and such themes as domestic violence, sexual assault, and such heavy topics, do you believe the S in ESG is often overlooked or misinterpreted? Why? Why not?
Overlooked, I wouldn't say. I think perhaps sometimes we skirt around the more contentious issues. We are scared to touch them. Because, first of all, that means challenging our own personal beliefs and values. Some issues might be too close to home, so we don't want to discuss them as well. Some other issues require a lot of convincing. So within, for example, a family business setting, I'm just giving an example, okay? Might have one person within the family, let's say, who wants to raise the salary he or she believes in offering. And you have three others who are the more conventional and they don't agree. So it takes a long time to convince and to create change. I have to answer the door. Sorry.
Go for it.
As anticipated. Sorry about that.
Sure, no worries.
Okay. Then I think something we need to do better is address the root cause of certain problems. So going back to the yes, we can spot maybe what some of the problems are. We tend to just address them in a little bit of a superficial way, you know. So I don't know, donating money to an NGO to do some for a campaign or for some kind of initiative. But what are we doing to contribute to tackling the source, the root cause of that problem? So that is where the concept of sustainability now comes in. So we need systemic change. And to do that, we need to work together. So if you're a business that wants to do something around this, you might need to work with the university, you might need to work with NGOs. And again, this is part and parcel of sustainability. We need to create these partnerships.
Interesting. Okay, so moving on to one of the last topics. I'm quite a big reader and podcast listener. So I wonder, Roberta, if there's any books or podcasts that you like, you enjoy, you'd recommend to our viewers.
Yes, actually, and I prepared myself and I brought a copy of the book to show you.
Nice.
So this book is called The Happy Hero.
It
It's by an author, well, a sustainability advisor and activist. Her name is Solitaire Townsend. She's the founder of Fotera, which is a change agency. She was one of the first people working in this field globally. And she wrote a number of books. This is one of them, The Happy Hero. And basically the gist of the book is that when we do something good for others, we feel happier and better ourselves. So let's not just sort of do good for others, but we stand to gain as well, kind of thing. And she shares some interesting stories and anecdotes. And it's a very light book, you know, anyone could read it. It's not heavy, it's not academic, so I really recommend it.
What a beautiful message. Happy Hero. I'll put that on my shelf.
Good book, it's really sweet.
Great. Okay. So the final question that I tend to ask people is twofold. What is your best and possibly your worst money memory?
Okay. The best I can remember, so I think it's when I bought my first apartment. You know, the satisfaction of having bought your first property, that was really exciting. I don't think the second gives you the same feeling, if you know what I mean, you know, that feeling of satisfaction. Um, the second, the bad one, the negative one, is actually quite recent. So I decided to be bold and invest in an advisory service, which I wouldn't call it a scam, but close to it. So it did not deliver what it was supposed to. It was quite pricey. So I felt, you know, that I wasted the money. It was a lesson. But I think we really need to be cautious who to trust as well.
Thank you for imparting that. And that's very, very nice of you. Well, Roberta, thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you for what you're doing. I think it's really, really important.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks everyone for listening. And remember to look out for the next episode of Daring to Disrupt through my YouTube channel. Until next time.